Shalom, everyone. All right. Now we're learning in Sefer, the book of Vayikra, right? The book of Leviticus, and it talks about the different sacrifices. And yesterday we talked about which sacrifices exactly are covered in this week's Torah portion, and we learned from this book, which is called Mitzvot Hashem. We talked about the different sacrifices, but maybe we can just get a little overview of exactly what happened when they sacrificed these sacrifices. What exactly was done when the sacrifices were made? So maybe we can try to make a little bit of a picture of it, just very shortly. What happened when the sacrifices were sacrificed? Can we make it bigger? Yeah, we can. Okay. Ready? I'm not doing it to make you see me, but the pictures. Okay, first of all, let us have a look at the altar. The altar, that's where they made the sacrifices. Ready? So let's see if this works. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but we can try it. Ready? Picture the altar. There's the altar. So there's an altar. There's a ramp, goes up. On the ramp was salt. We're going to learn about salt today. I hope we'll have time. There was salt. They would put salt on the offerings on the altar. Before that, of course, the animal was slaughtered and the blood was poured. There were several steps, but let's talk about it in 1 second. The animal would have to be brought, and then it would be slaughtered, and then the blood would be received in a special vessel, and the blood would be poured or splashed according to what sacrifice it was on the altar. And then the pieces of the animal would be stripped of its skin and cut up into pieces, certain sections, and those pieces would be brought up to this ramp. The Kohen, only the Kohen would do all this. Kohen would bring all this up. A non-Kohen was allowed to slaughter. He would bring it up to the ramp, and he would put salt on it and throw the pieces up on one of the fires that was going. There's one thing that I left out, and that is before he slaughtered it, he would put his hands on the press on it. That's called smicha. He would put his hands on the offering. So here we have pictures, a little bit of. Here we go. These are the different stages. Stage number 1, bringing the sacrifice, bringing it to the holy temple, bring it. Stage number 2, putting your hands on the sacrifice. He would stand next to it and press his hands on it, and he would confess. If he did a sin, he would confess. Stage number 3, they would slaughter the sacrifice. It would be held down. There's a ring over there. They put the head of the animal in, and that usually the rings were on the right side of the altar. There's a picture of the altar. Not a good picture. The rings anyway were over here, but this is the opposite way, so you can't see it very well. Anyways, this is the more of an accurate picture of the altar. When you went into the holy temple, this is the way it looked, and the rings were over here. Then they would spill the blood. The difference depends when. The leftover blood they would spill out, and then they would bring the offering. They would strip the offering of its skin and cut it up. Shata v'nituach, that's called. And then they would bring it to the altar. This is a picture of the bird offering, but anyway, they would bring it up on the altar. There we go. Excuse me. Don't help people don't get seasick from these pictures moving around. They would throw the blood on the altar. The bird was done a little bit differently. The bird was pressed on the altar. Anyway, it was thrown on the altar and burned. But before that, it was salted. It would be salted over here on the ramp. Excuse me. You have a little bit of an idea of what these sacrifices were, right? What the stages were in making these sacrifices. And there were different types of sacrifices. There was some were totally burned, some were not. Okay. That's the point I wanted to get across. And when the third temple comes, this will be done. Now, this will be done again. There'll again be sacrifices. Now, I'm going to make this smaller. Oh, there it goes. Right, the purpose of these sacrifices and the reason for them, that we learned in Chassidut and we learned other places. But let's have a look over here. Then there was what we call mincha. Mincha, this is today's, there's actually tomorrow. There was the mincha. The mincha was the bread offerings. Sometimes there were bread offerings. Now, with every sacrifice, also bread was brought. But here we have, sometimes just bread was brought alone. Bread offerings. There was 4 different types of bread. What was it? It says, this is what I wanted to get to today. Let's learn this today. With the bread, oh, here we go. Ready? Okay, so two laws I want to bring. 3 laws. Number 1, you have to bring salt with every offering. Every offering, you have to bring salt. Like I said, they salted it when they went up in the ramp. Number 2, it was forbidden to bring any unleavened bread. Unleavened bread, it's called. Bread that raises up. And raises up, it's forbidden to bring into the base of Mikdash. That's called seor. Seor is like sourdough. It makes the bread raise up. Forbidden to bring. Only 2 times is it permissible to bring, and that is in the offering of Shavuot. Just one moment, I want to close the door. סליחה, אני ממש חוסר שיעורך. Anytime you bring a bread offering, you can't make it from Chametz, except, like I said, only there were certain times, 2 exceptions to this rule, and that was in the Thanksgiving offering. There were 40 loaves of bread, and 10 of them were made of Chametz, and there was the offering in Shavuot, a holiday when the Torah was received, and then there were 2 loaves of chametz, of bread that rose up, right? Unleavened bread. That's what it's called. He calls saor because any leavened bread. Let's see if that's the translation. I don't remember what is leavened and what is unleavened bread. It's never. These are words that are never used in English. What is this? Where are my books? I can't find what I want. All right. All right, I should have looked it up before, but I never. But so simply when I get up to it, I never remember, and it's my safe is gone. I wanted to find. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Let's see how they translate it. Excuse me, please. You know what? I'll turn this off for 1 minute. Okay, here we go. So you can't be leavened bread. It can't be made that's from chametz, bread that rises up. Forbidden. Call sor any leavened bread, but called davash, and any honey. Oh, is this really honey? It's not honey. No, not honey. In this case, davash always means honey. In this case, davash means any sweet fruits. And we're going to see Rashi. That's what Rashi says. That's right. Very good. Yes, very good. Thank you very much. Chametz is leavened. All right, thank you. Okay, so yeah, you can't bring any sweet things. In other words, you can't bring any sweet fruits like dates or figs or anything. You can't bring them into the Isha to make a sacrifice to God. And here Rashi says, call davash. What does davash mean? Call matikat pri. Any sweet fruits you cannot bring into that's called davash. In this case, it's called davash. Why all of a sudden here it's called dvash? Usually honey from bees is called honey, but honey from bees is never brought into the holy temple. And that's what the next sentence says. These things you cannot bring into the holy temple, right? But korban reshit takribu, you can bring it for the first fruits. You can bring it to God. What is the first fruits? These sweet things. So it's obviously not honey, because there's no honey sacrifice in the holy temple. This is talking about sweet fruits. It says for the sweet fruits you can bring for the first when you bring the first fruits that you can bring. That is when the when you first fruits. That's when you bring the first fruits, bikurim. When you bring your bikurim, that's also brought on the holiday of Shavuot. On the holiday of Shavuot was the festival of weeks, how do they call it? On Shavuot, then everybody brings up their bikurim, their fruits that Israel is praised by, and they also bring chametz. So it says korban reshit. That's what Rashi says. Ma yesh lahavi min asur. What can you bring from the leavened bread and from sweet things? Korban reshit, the first sacrifice. What does it mean, first sacrifice? Namely, the 2 loaves of bread, shel atzeret, which are brought on the holiday of Shavuot. Atzeret is Shavuot. And how do they call it in English? What do they call it in English? Pentecostal or something? Pentecost. I don't know. Doesn't sound too Jewish to me. Ve'hevium min asur. You can bring them to the. That's what it's called, the Feast of Weeks. Anyway. Atzeret taviu min asur. That you can bring from unleavened bread. That you can bring from leavened bread. Leavened bread. So, like it says, chametz te'afena, the 2 loaves that are brought on Shavuot, they can be brought from leavened bread. Ubikurim, and also the first fruits, they are brought from the dvash. What's dvash mean? Sweet things. Like it says, bikuri te'enim etmorim. Like it says, dates and figs can be brought. Good. So now we learned you're not allowed to bring anything from chametz into the base of Mikdash for an offering, and the whole entire year, not just on Passover. And also, you're not allowed to bring any sweet fruits to make a sacrifice. You want to offer up a nice fig or something like that in the holy temple, don't do it. Now we have a positive commandment. You are, supposed to bring salt with every offering. And this is what I want to learn about now. Kol korban minchatcha, any offering of a bread offering. We're going to see this applies to all offerings. B'melach timlach, you must salt with salt. V'lo tashbit melach, do not omit, do not leave out salt, brit elokecha, the covenant of God. Me'al minchatecha, on your bread offering. Al kol korbancha, no, now it says on all of your sacrifices, you have to bring salt. Okay, we learned in the morning, in the Hasidic class in the morning, we're learning a mimer about this, that salt is very unique. And that salt, on one hand, it's very bitter, it's very, how do you say, sharp. And on the other hand, it sweetens everything up. And also, too much salt destroys everything. If you put salt on the ground, it destroys everything. But on the other hand, salt preserves everything. If you put something in salt, like you have beef jerky or something like that, you put it in salt, so it preserves it. And so we see that salt has all these, the opposite characteristics in it. Salt does. We're going to learn the Ramban over here, the beautiful Ramban. And here, let's go. Ready? Rashi, Melach Brit Elokecha. Also, there's another time where it says Brit Melach Olam. God says, remember the terrible, tragic story. I mean, it was mentioned once in the Torah. There's a whole Torah portion about it. And I hate to mention it again, but here it goes. There was the Jewish people, when they were in traveling in the desert, so stood up a person called Korach. And Korach said, let's make a war against Moses. And everybody said, okay. And they did. And they made a whole rebellion against Moses. Why did they do it? How did they do it? This is not the time to discuss that now. And, to try to find maybe some logic behind it. In any case, they made a war against Moses. And of course, Moses won. And the war was not just against Moses. The war was against Moses and Aaron. They didn't like it that Aaron was the Kohen. They wanted the Kohen to be more, available to everybody. New world order, no Kohanim, no Levis. Everybody's just, we're just one big family, and nothing is unique. No one, everyone's different. Everyone's the same. Nobody's different. Anyway, that was Korach, and he was pretty popular. It worked pretty good for Korach. He united all the Jewish people, but he lost in the end. God stepped in, and God punished all of Korach, and some of them fell into the ground. The hole opened up, and all sorts of weird things happened. Anyway, afterwards, God comes to Aaron and he says, you and your children, you're going to get special gifts as Kohanim, because you, Kohanim, you get a Brit Melach Olam, an eternal covenant of salt. What's salt? How did salt get into this whole picture? An eternal covenant. This is an eternal covenant of salt, because salt is something very, very, very powerful. So let's have a look at what is this thing of salt. Ready? Let's go. Rashi. Salt, melach brit. You should put the salt of the covenant of Elokecha, of your God. Now notice this does not use the usual name of God. It was called the higher name of God, which is called that's Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. See, it says it other places over here. Let's see where we have. Here, you see, you should make all of your sacrifices. Don't bring them to Hashem, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. That's God's name. That's God's name. Here it says the covenant is to Elokecha. Okay, so let's have a look. Rashi. Why salt? Brit Kruta Lamelech. A covenant was made with salt. Misheshet Shemei Bereshit, from the beginning of creation, in the 6 days of creation. Shehuvtava, the God promised Hamayim, the water, Atachtonim. Remember we talked about this in Chassidut in the morning. God promised the lower waters. God promised the lower water. What's the lower waters? What's this? On the second day of creation, it says God divided the upper waters from the lower waters. And we explained that the upper waters mean all of the life force and the pleasure and from the upper worlds, spiritual worlds. And the lower worlds, that's this physical world. That's the physical world, all the pleasures that there are here. And so the water did not want to split. So God said to the water, don't worry about it. I'm making a covenant with you, and you are going to be used for a very special purpose, 2 special purposes. One of them is to sacrifice. With every sacrifice, you're going to have salt. Salt is an integral part of water. Go to the ocean, it's salty water. Rarely you get once in a while, clean, what is it called? Sweet water. But that's very rare. All the oceans and this are covered salt water. It's pretty amazing. You know how much water there is in the world? I think, what is it, like 90%, 80%, something like that. The vast majority of the world is water. The Pacific is huge, right? And it's also water is not just on the surface. Water is very deep. And it's all salty. All the water is salty. I don't know. I never went into one of the what's called bathysphere or something like that. As far as I know, it's all, even when you get down like 2 miles under, it's all salty. The water is salty. So you got billions, who knows, of trillions, quadrillions of tons of water in the world, and it's all salty. It's all salty so God said, I'm going to make all the pleasures of the world. That's called the lower waters. That's called the lower waters. And you are, and it's going to be down here. But from the water, I'm giving you a consolation prize. Now, really, this is not really a consolation prize. This is, in fact, the whole reason that God is creating the world. This whole idea of lower waters, this is the whole story of the creation, right? If God wanted the upper worlds, he would just leave the upper worlds, and we wouldn't have to give the Torah to people, give it to the angels, and the angels would be crying and screaming out to God all the time, and God would be bored, terribly, terribly bored all the time. He wouldn't be a king over anything, because God wants us to use our free will to take these lower waters and transform it. And that's the idea of the salt. you're taking these lower waters and you bring them on the altar. And also, Nisuch HaMayim B'Chag, the water pouring ceremony, which was done in the holiday of Sukkot. And this has to be brought on all of your sacrifices, al olat behema, and all the sacrifices of the animal and the oaf and the parts of all of the, because those animals are sacrificed totally, and also the pieces of all of the animals that are sacrificed on the altar, the pieces that are eaten by the Kohanim, they don't have to salt them unless they want to boil it. If you want to boil it, in general, here's a law that maybe you should learn. In the Jewish people do not eat blood, right? Don't eat blood from the meat. Sort of. That's not 100% true. The fact of the matter is that you can. Jewish people are allowed to eat meat with the blood in it. You can't do it. You can, yes, do it. If you eat it raw. If you decide you want to eat the meat raw, you're allowed to eat meat with the blood in it. Some people say that every time you take a bite, you have to wash it off because the blood on the surface is forbidden, but the blood that's in the meat is permissible. But if you want to boil it, if you roast it, then there's no problem. The fire takes the blood out. If you want to boil it, you have to salt it first. You have to salt the meat first. Okay, so therefore, if they wanted to eat it in the Holy Temple, if they wanted to eat, the Kohanim wanted to eat it roasted, so then they didn't have to salt it. But if they did, they had to salt it. But here, that's not what this is talking about. All of the offerings that were brought in the temple that were thrown up on the fire, right? I showed you that picture of the fire on the altar. Anything that was thrown up on the fire had to be salted first. And in fact, there were three places that were salt. There was a place where salt was stored regularly. Then there was salt on the ramp that went up. And then there was salt on the top of the altar also. There's some things that had to be salted there also. Let's look at the Ramban. Ramban is pretty interesting. There's one sentence over there that I had a little trouble with. Let's try. Ready? Lo Tashbid Melch, says the Ramban. The Ramban, he wrote a lot according to Kabbalah. Really, all these people that are brought here. The Kli Ykar also, he was in the time of the Maharal of Prague that made a human being. And so he was like at the same level. And also amazingly, the HaChaim is not here. The HaChaim is in other places. See, HaChaim. He is also, these were people that were very, very versed in the secrets of the Torah. So let's go. Shabrit, do tashbid melech brit elokecha. Do not leave out salt. Do not omit putting salt, which is the covenant of God. Shabrit, that there is a covenant, karuta, which is made with salt from the beginning of creation, that it was promised. This brings Rashi. There was the water, the lower water was promised that it would bring on the altar, and also for pouring the water. That's what Rashi says. And this is a Midrash Chachamim. And Rab Avraham, that's the Eben Ezra, he says on Pshat that that God put us into a covenant, and he swore to us that we should not make sacrifices with no taste. And that it shouldn't be eaten kihu derech bizayon. And those things should be salted and eaten. That it should be tasty. Uba'avur shio brit b'korbanot yasa katuv zot abrit av lakal abritot. Therefore, this covenant is a covenant for all of the sacrifices that were made. You had to bring salt because salt makes things tasty. So it comes to show that you have to have a certain enjoyment in Torah and mitzvahs. Okay, here we go. Therefore, it says this salt now is an essential part of all of the covenants that God made with the Kohanim, with the Kohens, and with the kingship of King David. So this is, David already is connected with Mashiach. David, the Mashiach, is going to be Mashiach ben David. Like it says, there's a pasuk in the Torah, in Divrei Yomim, in the book of Chronicles, the second book of Chronicles, two books of Chronicles. Look over the second book of Chronicles, chapter 13, sentence 5. It says, Brit Melach God said, I will make with King David and his offspring a eternal covenant of salt. Kihu kayim kabrit hamelach. This is like the same thing as the sacrifices will have salt in them forever. So also King David, I'm making a covenant with him that just like the sacrifices will return and they'll be salted in the Holy Temple, so the kingship of King David will be returned. Okay, Rabbi Avram, he explains that this thing of Brit Kruth of Gezeret Eretz Malecha, that there was also a covenant which was made with salted land. What does it mean, salted land? Any place where there's salt on the land is karut, it is cut off. But he doesn't agree. The Rambam says, I don't agree with what he says. That's what it means. He cut a brit, means the same thing means nichrata, that the land gets cut off. Okay, I don't agree with what he says. Ein tam the devorah. Okay, mipenei, because it says over here, brit elokecha. It says as a covenant with brit elokecha, your God, and this is a lower aspect of God. It doesn't say brit Hashem, like in the Parsha. And Kaderach Kol Korbanot, like all of the other sacrifices, are all made to Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Or Yomar, it says Brit Hashem Elokecha, or maybe it'll say Brit. If it does say Elokecha, it brings the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. In other words, it has to be a good thing. Ani so verbo. Now the Rambam is saying what I think. Salt, Shamelech, Maim, is really water. And from the sun, right? You look in the sea, take sea water out, and it's all salty, but you don't see any salt in there. Salt is part of the water. When the sun beats down on the water, on the ocean water, then comes salt. But so salt contains in the two things. Water, ocean water contains in the two things, salt and water. Salt is very sharp, but the water in its nature, it satisfies the world. It irrigates the land. And that causes the ground to grow things up. So we see that salt comes from water. Water causes the earth to grow. Salt, on the other hand, wrecks the earth. Because there was salt, as yichrutu kol makom, this will cut everything off, destroy everything. Be yisrafu, lo tizra, you won't be able to plant anything, and nothing will grow. So if so, we see that the covenant that God made with the Jewish people, kalula mikol amidot, it's included from all of the different aspects of God. Water that fertilizes everything, it makes everything grow. The aish, but the fire that destroys everything, that's like the salt. Bo and bo are in it. These are the words I just don't understand. What exactly these three words mean. In any case, somehow or other, this is connected to the first rulership of King David, the Malachas Hashem. Therefore, the rulership of King David is connected with this covenant of salt. And this, because King David is a representative of God. Therefore, it's like salt, that it puts a taste in all the foods. But on the other hand, it can cut off anything that has to be cut off, just like this covenant. Therefore, it says in the Torah with King David, we brought this before, Halo lachem ladat, should you not know, Ki Hashem Elokei Yisrael, that God, Natan mamlachat David, that he gave rulership to King David, Al Yisrael, lo olam, forever, lo labanav, him and his children, Brit melach olam, a covenant of salt forever. Because this is also the aspect of King David, just like it's the aspect of Hashem. Namely, what? That on one hand, it puts taste in everything, and on the other hand, it can cut everything off. On one hand, the salt comes from the water. Water makes everything grow. On the other hand, when there's too much salt, so salt burns the whole land. Nothing grows. Lochen, therefore, Omer b'karbonos, it says in the sacrifices, Brit melach olam. Therefore, there's an eternal covenant with salt, because salt also preserves everything. Oh, because salt also preserves everything. This is the covenant of salt that will exist. So therefore, the sacrifices have this eternal covenant of salt, because also King David, the kingship of King David, which from that's going to come the Mashiach, is an eternal covenant of salt. Therefore, I think you should think about this and realize that these three Brit Olam, this is a thing of being what it means, a Brit, a covenant, what it means for forever. That's the whole secret of salt. Okay, that's what the Ramban said. That we're learning in the Chassidut in the morning. Really, the Chassidut in the morning brings down all these aspects of what the Ramban says, but it explains them in much more detail. Namely, the salt contains in it all of these opposites. It comes from water, which is good. It comes from salt, which on the other hand is not good. It preserves things. It destroys things. It gives taste to everything. The Baal HaTurim says, from Rav Yaakov Baal HaTurim, wrote the book The Tur on the Shulchan Aruch, in the first Shulchan Aruch. It says over here 3 times it mentions melach in the sentence. Melach timloch, melach brit alokecha, melach. 3 times it says the word melach. This hints at the 3 places where salt was put in the Holy Temple. Belishkat HaMelech, there was one room that the salt was kept there. Ala kevish, on the ramp, and ala mizbeach, and on the altar itself there was. Takriv Melech, these words, Takriv Melech, if you remember, Baal HaTurim is an expert in gematrias. So he says, this is the gematria of Ze Yavi Melech Mishal Tzibur. You have to bring salt. The salt has to come from the congregation. All right, let's do the Kli Ykar. I wanted to do the Dat Zakenim. I don't know if we'll have time. Kol korban minchatcha b'melech timlav. Just we said, anytime you bring a sacrifice, you have to put salt in it. Kedei, in order, lahamlich, to make rule. Now the word melach has a chet, but it's pronounced the same thing as melach, as God, being a king. In order to make God rule, al kol hafachim, on all of the opposites, like we said, Anirim B'olam, which are in the world. V'gormu l'rabim l'tzeit l'aminot. And this, all the opposites in the world, caused a lot of people to deny God. V'lomer, and say, mitchila achat lo yatsa beit hafachim. That from God cannot come out 2 opposites. So there must be 2 gods. One God of spiritual, one God of physical. One God of the heavens, one God of the earth, one God of the bed. The Hindus are big experts at this stuff. But really, basically, that's the, all idolatry is based on that. 2 gods can't be 2 things. Christianity, the idea is God is very high and very low, can't be 2. And if you want to get close to God, you have to have somebody in the world. There can't come from the one God, can't come 2 opposites. So there's like 2 gods, 3 gods, whatever. So it says that's the whole idea of the salt, to tell you that one thing can contain all these opposites. A melech, salt, has a something and its opposite. It's like fire, and heat. And it also comes from water. Where does salt come from the water? Until the Chachmei Kabbalah, until the masters of the secrets of the Torah, Shukaneged, this corresponds to Midat Adin. This corresponds to That's what we learned in Chassidut in the morning, right? God's severity and God's mercy contained in one. Alken, therefore, Nikra Brita Lokecha, therefore it's called the covenant of God. Why salt is God? Why not sugar should be God? Why salt? Kiba kravat zu, that when you bring salt to the sacrifices, kortim brita Hashem, you make a covenant with God, lashlito, to say that God rules on all of the opposites. God is up in the highest worlds where things are unlimited. God is the master of the lower worlds where everything is limited. God is the master of all negative things, of all positive things. The kol min chascha, and therefore all of the sacrifices, except for the Kohen, were eaten by the Kohanim. Oh, I see. There was one offer that was brought by the Kohanim, but all the other bread offerings that were eaten by the other Kohanim. V'zeh hu kamot tzedakah. This is like charity. Shenim shalom melech. That charity is compared to salt. Why? Because what does salt do? If you put salt on meat, you put a lot of salt on meat. Hamid umakayam et basar. This preserves meat. Kach melech, also salt. Kach melech mamon chaser. Also, it says that. So I don't know. You have to look this up. I didn't look this up. It says there's a sentence that salt is lacking money. I don't know what that means. I have to look it up. Sorry. But tzedakah shebakorban gedola mina korban atzmo. The charity which is in the sacrifices, especially this commandment of bringing salt, where is it mentioned? Really has to be in all the sacrifices. But this, it's mentioned specifically by the mincha. It says, korban minchatcha, by the bread offerings. The bread offerings, they were eaten by the other kohanim. So it's really a form of charity that you have to bring. That's what it's showing that you're giving. That's what it says, that God makes tzedakah umishpat nivchar lashem mizevach. A person that gives charity and does justice, this is chosen more to God than the actual animal sacrifices. In other words, the animal sacrifices were very important. And that's why there was a whole big building built specially for it. And that's why it was such a tragedy that God destroyed the temple, because we can't make these sacrifices anymore. And because the sacrifices are very precious to God. But you have to know that even more precious to God is giving charity and doing justice to others. That's why it says, on kol karbancha takriv melech. Now, charity and justice are two opposites. Charity means you give to people that don't deserve, and justice means you give only to people that deserve. And people that don't deserve, you don't allow them to steal. But charity means you give to everybody. So justice in this case is like severity, and charity, that's like the water, and justice is like fire. And that's what it's all contained. It says in salt. It's all hinted at it's salt because it says, that's what it says, that charity and justice is more choice to God than the offering that you make. On the offering is salt. Salt in the offering is the offering. The salt indicates these two opposites of giving charity to people and also being just. And that's what it says, I'll call korban takriv melach, that the salt is what goes on all the sacrifices. This is nivchar l'Hashem. And because the salt in some ways is even more choice, the salt represents this idea of giving charity and severity and justice. This is even more choice to God than the sacrifice itself. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow, right? How the salt is, it contains all opposites. I think it's very interesting. God bless you all. See you all tomorrow at 8:15 with Mashiach now.